Well, hey there, American Farmsteaders. This is Jenny with the Gramstead Family Farm.
And Donna with Hazel Bell Farm.
And we are coming to y'all from Northeast Florida as two American farmsteaders doing our best to grow our own food and share our homesteading experiences with you in hopes that you'll grow a little food of your own.
Yep. This week we are talking with Robyn Jackson, author of Cheese from Scratch, a new homesteadish cookbook, right? Hi, Robyn.
Hi, thank you guys so much for having me.
Thank you for coming.
Thanks for being here. We're excited to have you on. We haven't done much on our podcast as way of like home dairy. So
yeah,
this will be fun.
Yeah.
Well, I love talking about dairy, so I'm excited for this podcast.
Well, you want to start?
Yeah. So, well, I'll preface this with saying that Robyn has a brand new book out. It is beautiful. I was just looking through it. Donna's actually had it for a little while now.
Show it to our viewers.
Yes.
Cheese from Scratch.
You probably ordered it as soon as it came out, didn't you?
I did. Well, I didn't because I was scared, honestly. Like, as somebody who makes cheese, I thought, don't rock the boat. you know what works. But also, I'll tell you, like, you have a reel out there that says you start these 4 recipes with the same way. And it's like a Gouda, Havarti, a Jack, and something else, I think. Am I right on that?
Yeah, there's lots of cheese that start the same way. So, like the first 4 steps of most of my recipes, not every single one, but most of them kind of start the same way. So I don't even decide what kind of cheese I'm going to make till later on the day, which works really good when you're homesteading and got all the other things going on.
Yeah. That's the statement that you said in the reel that had me. And I was like, yes, that's what I need. That's how I can make cheese fit in my life. Because even though we make cheese and we have the milk, so often I don't make cheese because I feel like I don't have the time. So
yeah, exactly. And it takes a lot of mental energy to like be like, what am I going to make? How am I going to fit that into my day? So it's kind of like when you first learn how to bake bread, you just make just like plain old white bread. But then when you figure it out a little bit, you're like, oh, I'm going to make cinnamon buns and pizza dough and like all the things. So you can just kind of take that recipe that's sort of your standard, you know how to do it really good, and kind of a branch out, which helps fit it so well into your day.
Yes.
Well, and one quick takeaway I did get from your book was that, once you start this process, if you mess it up, you didn't mess up the whole thing. You just made it into something else.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that was encouraging.
It's kind of scary, like when you look at cheese making, because not a lot of us really know like much about cheese making. It's not something that we grow up really seeing our parents doing, other than, my kids and your kids are growing up doing it. But that's kind of, it's odd. You're not kind of used to seeing it. So it's such this foreign topic that you don't really think that, oh, I could just kind of pivot if something doesn't go quite as planned, which is really reassuring, I think, when you're just learning how to do it.
Yeah. So how long have you been into this? Like, how did you get started with all this cheese making?
Yeah, it's been 11 years now. I keep saying 10 years, but it's been 11 years. So in 2014, my husband, so we live in Canada, but my husband's from Wisconsin, the dairy state. And he was on a dairy farm there in Wisconsin and then moved to Canada, and we started a cattle ranch, met me, all the sorts of things. And so in 2014, he brought me home a dairy cow and asked me to make some cheese. It was kind of under the guise that we were going to use this dairy cow on our beef ranch to kind of feed any orphan calves or anything like that. And I kind of just fell in love with it, and I've been making cheese ever since. So that's kind of the story about how we got started.
Nice. So obviously you're using your raw milk to make your cheese products. But, for those of us who don't have dairy animals at home, are we like, can we use any type of milk? Like if we need to go get it from the grocery store, can we still do this?
Yeah, for sure. So you can use a lot of types of milk. So the minimally processed is kind of what I like to tell people when they're looking to source milk for cheese making. So you don't want to use the biggest one. You don't want to use ultra pasteurized milk. So that UTH, or I can't remember the acronym right off of my head, but that ultra pasteurized milk, it won't work for cheese making. So that's the only one that absolutely won't work. And then just kind of thinking about trying to get as minimally processed as possible. So
Mhm.
if you can, trying to get milk that hasn't been homogenized, because that's a separate thing from the pasteurization. You can use pasteurized milk, just regular pasteurized milk for cheese making, but it's going to work better if it hasn't gone through that homogenization process. But I know a lot of people can't find pasteurized, non-homogenized milk. It's just not something that's available in their area. And there's a lot of cheesemakers out there that do use homogenized milk. So that's kind of reassuring there. And then I tell people just to go as fresh as possible. So there's kind of this misconception that old milk it makes like good cheese, but it actually just
Mhm.
it makes cheese. It's on its way to becoming cheese. It might not be good cheese, but
Right.
I prioritize that fresh milk is going to help you to make the best possible cheese. And in like my own cheese making, that's kind of been the biggest needle mover in making better cheese for my family is kind of prioritizing that fresh as possible milk.
That freshness,
Yeah.
fresh and properly handled, and
Right.
yeah,
For sure. Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Yeah, because cheese making is our ability to preserve our milk. So, when we take that fresh milk and then we turn it into cheese, we're really kind of guiding it on its journey. Versus if you're using that older milk that's already on its journey to becoming cheese, we're not so much of a guide for it. We're kind of just coming in and being like, hopefully this works. But yeah, so it's much easier to make cheese with fresh milk.
Yeah. So, getting started from like a beginner perspective, if I wanted to go and start making cheese tomorrow, like where do I start?
Yeah, for sure. I think that starting with any sort of fresh cheese is a really good idea. Even starting with like processing, like making your own yogurt at home. Lots of people don't really think of yogurt as a cheese, but it really
Mhm.
is. It's basically the same process as a lot of fresh cheeses out there. And so when you kind of start learning how to make yogurt, and there's a lot of resources for it, you can figure out how to do it very, very easily for free online. You can even use your Instant Pot. Like there's all sorts of
Right.
little
That's what I
tools out there
do.
to get it done. Yeah, I use my Instant Pot for it all the time. You don't have to. You can use a jar and a towel on the counter and you can make yourself yogurt. But it's kind of a good starting point just to be like, wow, this is easy because it really is just amazingly easy. And you wouldn't think that kind of looking in as an outsider that's never processed dairy.
I
Right.
tell people that all the time to start with yogurt. Yogurt is something that a lot of households purchase. And so to
Mhm.
me, and because it is so simple, and if I do have older milk, yogurt is where it usually goes. Yogurt or ricotta is where it goes. And yogurt will last forever in the refrigerator, especially once it's strained off. We really like a thick, heavy
Yeah.
Greek strained yogurt. And I've never had yogurt go bad in the fridge, as long as the jar does not get contaminated by teenagers.
Keeping it closed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah, and it
yogurt I
like
think
makes
is a good place.
it like makes your
Nice.
money go a lot farther too, especially when you're buying milk, because like you said, you can strain it, but you also can just not strain it, and then you bought a gallon of milk, and now you have a gallon of yogurt, so you're really kind of upscaled that milk. So that's really good for a lot of people because when you
Mm.
get into making kind of fancier cheeses, like say a cheddar, you're only going to yield about at the very best milk, you're only going to yield about 1 pound per gallon of milk that you're using. So that's not a lot of cheese. That's not going to save you money if you are buying your milk. So that is a good thing about yogurt as well.
Oh, that's a good tip. I've never heard that ratio about a pound per gallon. So,
Yeah, that's like the very best quality milk. Usually you're getting a lot less than that for
okay.
those hard cheeses.
Okay. Interesting.
It is.
Do you have, why don't we start more with your questions? I'm sure you have more newbie questions.
Okay. So let's talk about the difference between making cheeses and yogurts and all the dairy products, from cow milk or goat milk or even sheep milk. Like, do you have any experience with the goats or the sheep?
Yeah, well, I teach everybody, but I only have experience with cows, really.
Uh-huh.
So the cool thing about milk is that, yes, there's differences between species, but you can make a lot of the same recipes with all of those different types of milk. So, for example, I make cow's milk feta, but lots of people are making sheep's milk feta or goat's milk feta with like my same recipe. So that's kind of a cool thing about it because you can use the milk that you have available to you. And I know a lot of smaller homesteads, maybe a cow isn't going to work on their property, but a
Right.
goat or a sheep is going to be work really well, or a herd of goats and sheep because they like to have friends. A herd of goats and sheep on their homestead maybe would be a better option for them, and for what they have to feed them and everything. So that's a reassuring thing that you can make amazing cheese with all different species of milk. You're not limited to just making Chev if you only have goats. I've got a friend, Nest in the West is her handle on Instagram, Sarah. And so she makes all sorts of different, like hard cheeses like Goudas and I don't know, other hard cheeses with her goat's milk, and is making really, really amazing cheese for her family. So that's a cool thing about just being able to use the species of milk that you have available to you.
Nice. Nice. And since you brought it up, feta is my favorite.
It's mine
Yeah.
too.
I love feta. Is that easy to make?
It's
Yeah, it's
it's one of
actually,
my favorites to make when I
Is
have
it?
too much milk. Yes, because
yeah.
it's easy and I can dump a lot of milk into it and get some good cheese.
Hmm.
They have some really good cheese. Yeah, I recommend feta as like if you have done yogurt and a few little fresh cheeses, like feta is the first one I recommend for an aged cheese for people because you can you probably already have everything in your kitchen, like as far as equipment goes that you need to make it, and then you can age it in your regular refrigerator just in its brine. And so it's kind of limited setup to get going.
Okay. And so what are those like basic ingredients that you need to get started
Mhm. So it's so cool. There
other
is
than
thousands
milk?
of different cheese in the world. Yeah, there's thousands of different cheese in the world, and they're all basically made from the same four ingredients. There's some differences between the ingredients, but for the most part, they're made from the four same ingredients, which is that milk, that really good quality milk, and then rennet, which is an enzyme that you can get at any cheese supply store. There's different types of rennet. They're mostly all going to work for cheese making. And then bacterial culture. So we call this starter culture. This is a lactic bacteria. There's all sorts of types of those as well. But usually on the cheese supply websites, they'll kind of tell you which ones are going to work for different types of cheeses. And a lot of them work for multiple different types of cheeses. One thing that I teach a lot about on my account is, and in my book, is clabber culture. So it's basically the sourdough starter of the cheese making world. So I cultivate my own lactic bacteria at home from my raw milk, and then use that as a cheese making starter culture. So there's lots of different options for getting that starter culture. And then the last of those four ingredients is salt. So salt is kind of the referee when it comes into cheese making. It's going to help us regulate that fermentation. So cheese making is fermentation, and that's also reassuring to a lot of people that are just learning how to make cheese. Is that idea that it's not a lot different from like making sourdough or from fermenting vegetables. It's kind of the same process. You're using that same fermentation process to make it. And then another ingredient that's kind of like a bonus ingredient if you are using pasteurized milk is something called calcium chloride. And anytime you're using rennet in cheese making with pasteurized milk, you have to add in this calcium chloride because during the pasteurization process, the calcium in the milk has actually been damaged. And so we need to add that back in. So that's one of the reasons that I really, one of the reasons that I really like using raw milk for cheese making is because then you don't have to add that extra ingredient in. But if
Right.
that's all you have access to, it's a very inexpensive ingredient and it lasts forever in your fridge. So,
Mhm.
um, yeah, just that. Yeah, so
So
those are ingredients.
I have a question on that note with clabber. So
Yeah.
clabber is new to me. Just this year, sometime early, a few months ago, was the first time I made anything out of clabber. I was terrified, even though I've been milking cows and using our raw milk for 10 years. And I've taken all the heat from all the loved ones about how
Right.
awful it is that I feed it to my family.
And all of a sudden you're terrified.
And so I did a clabber cheese, and I think it probably took like 4 or 5 days to actually like get it good. And I was like, I don't know, this smells a little funky, but it's not bad. It smells cheesy, but it's different. Up until that point, I've only purchased cultures. So I actually have two questions. One, can I use my own clabber at home in place of most any culture when I'm making cheeses?
Yeah, so clabber, so I think clabber that you're talking about and versus clabber culture, they're kind of different things. So the culture, the clabber culture is basically you make that clabber. So you take raw milk, you let it sit out on the counter until it coagulates. Usually it takes 3, 4 days. It doesn't smell that good. It's kind of makes you wonder. And I don't like to eat, I don't really like to eat that phase of clabber, but then you're gonna take a little tiny bit of that and you're gonna feed it to new raw milk. And then in 24 hours, it's going to be coagulated. And then the next day, you're going to do the same thing and the same thing. And so you're always just taking a tiny bit of that and feeding it to fresh raw milk. So in doing that, because there's all sorts of different lactic bacterias within that culture, every day you're giving them new food so that they can stay strong and healthy and protective. So that's the difference between just keeping clabber versus keeping a clabber culture.
Mhm.
And so I use clabber culture in all of my cheese making in replacement of all starter cultures. So there's some kind of controversy of maybe you should just use it for so in the cheese making world there's basically two head categories of starter cultures. One is called mesophilic, which is a low temperature loving culture, and one is called thermophilic, which is more of a warmer temperature loving cultures, and there's lots of different lactic bacteria strains within those cultures. And so some people say, you can only use Clabber for mesophilic cheeses, but I use it for thermophilic ones as well. And I'm seeing that it works. So it's just kind of up to you, especially if you kind of live in a warmer climate, because you're naturally going to be cultivating more warmer cultures versus if you live in a colder climate, you're going to be cultivating those cooler cultures as well. So
Okay.
yeah,
That answers a lot, actually.
yeah.
And then next question, if somebody is not keeping a clabber and keeping that clabber culture continuously going, if they could only purchase one culture for most of their cheese making, what would you recommend they purchase?
Yeah, I would recommend they purchase a mesophilic that would suit most of the types of cheeses that they want. So my favorite is mesophilic Vienna type 2 is the one that I used to use all the time before I started using clabber culture. I think all of the cheese supply stores that I know of, the main one in the States would be the cheesemaking.com. I think
Yeah.
it's New England Cheesemaking. Yeah, I think
Yes.
they carry that one. And then Glengarry Cheesemaking that also ships to the States, but is more, it's based in Canada. They carry that one as well. So that suits for a lot of different types of cheeses, and it's the only kind of mesophilic one that I kept on hand. But if you can't get that culture, then just any sort of mesophilic culture that's going to fit most of the cheeses you plan on making. There is like some thermophilic cheeses, but there's way less thermophilic cheeses than there is mesophilic ones. So cheeses like brie and feta and Colby cheddar, Gouda, those are all examples of mesophilic cheeses that aren't heated to like a higher temperature during the make and is going to benefit from that type of culture.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. That is helpful. And
Yeah.
then I have another question on my, as far as the clav, because like I said, clabber's new for me. So can I shelve my clabber culture in the refrigerator if I like a sourdough starter per se? Can I just like cap it, put it away, and then bring it back out to feed new milk when I'm ready?
Yeah, for sure. I do that all the time. You just do
Okay,
want to make sure that you feed it a couple times when you bring it out before you use it as a starter culture for cheese making. So, like my big rule about clabber is I treat it just like a sourdough starter. Like you would never bake with a sourdough starter that hasn't been fed the day before. You know that your bread would just wouldn't turn out as well.
sure.
So I always make sure, even if my clabber culture looks the same on day two as it looks on day one, I always make sure it was fed the day before I use it for cheese making, especially when I'm making aged cheeses. I'm a little bit more lenient if I'm making a fresh cheese that I'm not kind of and I'm not really caring at how it continues to age. But when you're making an aged cheese, you want to be really diligent about making sure it's always fed the day before. And if you take it out of the fridge, making sure you feed it usually a couple times. I try to do before I go on to cheese making. And I usually only keep it in the fridge for about a week, and then I'd pull it out, feed it, let it coagulate again, and then put it back in the fridge if I didn't need it.
Perfect. That's exactly what I needed to hear. Because
Yeah.
again, I want to pick your brain more in a little bit about fitting cheese into every day on, in homestead life and everything else we have going on. So
Yeah,
that actually helps a lot for
and just
sure.
to go back to Jenny's question before about like what cheese you should start with. So I kind of recommend yogurt if you don't have raw milk access, but if you do have constant raw milk access, like if you have your own dairy animals, specifically cows, people find goats a little bit harder to start clabber, although there is people that have goat clabbers going. But I would tell them to start a clabber culture because you can just take that clabber and turn it into so many different fresh dairy products, and you don't even have to venture into the aged dairy products just at the beginning. But once you get a clabber culture going, it feels kind of like the world is your oyster. You can do so many different things. You could cook it down and now you have cottage cheese, or you could strain it and now you have cream cheese, or like a yogurt substitute if you strain it a little bit less. So it's a really versatile product, and it makes having a dairy animal, it just makes it easier because you already know how to keep a clabber culture, and it's just so easy to take that one step further and turn it into something else.
Nice.
Yeah.
It's so amazing to me that all of this has been figured out. Because with all the different cheeses and they're all made different ways, and really it probably came down to somebody really did some serious trial and error a really, really, really long time ago to figure out all this. It's so sciencey to me.
But it's
Yeah.
so
I
basic,
It's so
right?
big, so sciencey, yeah. Like, and it's amazing in the last 150 years how much it's changed because cheese is made for thousands of years, but it's in the last 150 years that it's basically become sciencey. Before that, it was just something that, people that had dairy animals were doing to be able to preserve their milk, and it was just very simple for them. So that's like something reassuring that I always go back to when you start to get a little bit confused in all the science of it. Like it's just really at its root, it's a very simple process. It's a
Right,
natural process. Yeah.
right.
Yeah, it definitely is. Okay. I know we've kind of been all over the place as far as my questions go, but my questions weren't in any
Yeah.
particular order. So I have to figure out what have we asked? What have you got?
Um, okay, so I know we talked about the four basic ingredients, which to recap, let me see if I remember here, was milk, salt, rennet, and
A culture.
a culture. And then calcium chloride if you're using pasteurized milk.
Yeah, for
Okay.
sure.
So what basic like kitchen tools? Like what do we need as far as, bowls, pots, pans, all that good stuff?
Yeah, I always like to tell people that you probably already have everything you need in your kitchen to just kind of get started with some basic cheeses. And I recommend they do that before they start going out and buying everything because you might not need everything that you'll go out and buy. But the main things that you're going to need is a pot that fits your milk. When I first started, I used it my enamel canning pot. I don't really recommend doing that, but I used my enamel canning pot for a few years before I went out and bought a larger stainless steel pot. Stainless steel is kind of the recommended metal of choice for making cheese. You don't want to use aluminum or anything because cheese is very acidic. It will pit. I had an aluminum pot, and like the pitting inside of the pot was kind of gross. So like, oh, that's all in my cheese.
Yeah, aluminum's reactive. So yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
exactly.
Okay.
So avoid aluminum. Stainless steel is the best, kind of cheapest option for cheese making. And then a thermometer is really important when you're just getting started. Because there's a lot of different recipes and a lot of just different nuances in the recipes, you're going to kind of be looking for sort of specific temperatures. So you want to be giving your bacterial cultures the best climate for them to be able to work in. So temperature is really important. Cheesecloth. So I tell people don't go to the grocery store and get that kind of flimsy, like jelly making cheesecloth. So it's very fibrous. It's for, I think, making jelly. It's not good cheesecloth. So I tell people flour sack towels are kind of my choice for cheesecloth. They're very inexpensive. I get mine at Walmart. You can get them at any kind of department store or Amazon, whatever. So those are the cheesecloth types that I use. And then just like spoons, whisks, that sort of thing. Once you really figure out what type of cheese you're going to be making, then you probably should invest in some sort of cheese form. So if you're planning on making some pressed cheeses, buying a cheese form that's going to work for the amount of milk that you're planning on processing. So that rule of thumb again that I said, that 1 pound of cheese per gallon of milk that you are using for making cheese, if you're going to be making typically typically 4-gallon batches of cheese, you're going to want to get between a 3 and 4 pound cheese form. And you can buy those on the cheese supply website. When I first started, I kind of used to like rig up just ones from like random things that I had in my house, like springform pans and stuff like that. And that's the one
Books,
thing that
jars.
yeah, exactly. All sorts of different things. And that's the one thing, if I could go back, like all the time I spent trying to rig something up, I could have just bought it for like, they're so inexpensive. They're like $15 or something like that. It would
Right,
have saved me a
right.
lot of headaches. So I do recommend buying a cheese form. As far as the cheese press, not all cheeses need to be pressed, which was something that I didn't know when I first started making cheese. I thought that just all cheeses need to be pressed because I'd seen that. But a lot of them don't. For example, feta and brie, they're cheeses that are going to press with their own weight, so you don't need to apply pressure. But it's really easy to kind of rig up a press at home just to see if you like cheese making, as long as you have that cheese form that has a follower. So using 2 5-gallon buckets and filling the top 5-gallon bucket with water and then putting that on top of your cheese to press it, things like that, stack of books, anything like that can press your cheese. So you really can kind of make do with what you have. And then just other things like strainers and a rack and like a Tupperware container to dry your cheese in, and just like little things like that that you probably already have in your home.
So not much.
Yeah, not
No,
much.
Not really.
no, I
Not
mean,
really
I haven't bought much for making
to get
cheese.
started. Yeah.
No, I mean, a press, I do have a press. It's not a fancy press. I bought it used from somebody who never used it. And so I kind of got a deal on it, but it doesn't have like gauges on it or anything. I don't know how many pounds of pressure I'm using. I just kind of wing it, and so far it's working. You know?
That's my favorite kind of move is wing it in cheese
Yeah,
making.
I mean, that's how
Yeah.
cheese works in my house. And
Yeah.
as far as I'm so glad to hear you say flour sackcloth because that's what I started using. Because again, I tried the cheesecloth in the grocery store and it's very linty and
Mhm.
it just kind of pulls apart. And then the whole sizes are all different and it just didn't work. And I remember standing in Walmart and looking at the flour sackcloth, going, I think that'll work for cheese. And that's what I primarily have used since then. And so, like, I'm a rule breaker in that kind of way and just making stuff work. So I'm glad to hear, like, I feel like you're a professional and that it
No,
works for
I'm
you too.
not.
And I think I have a couple of forms. I mean, they're just very basic little round baskets. And then as far as drying goes, I use sushi mats. We don't eat sushi in this house, but I have some sushi mats that I wrap after a cheese comes out of a press. I'll wrap it in paper towels and set it on on the sushi mat and let it dry, and I'll just flip it over. But I think the Tupperware idea or the Rubbermaid bin or something like that that you said with a lid that you can kind of leave popped open so that it dries out is a good idea. But yeah, as
Yeah,
far as
exactly.
like
Especially
buying stuff, I
because
haven't really bought much at all as far as equipment goes.
Okay.
I mean, you have colanders, you have pots.
Right.
and when you get like when you start making a little bit more, then you can get a little bit fancier. Like I have a Dutch press that I really love. Like I swear by the
Oh,
Dutch press. I think that everybody should have one if they make a lot of cheese. Like my aging area, I used to just age in my regular refrigerator, and then I moved to having a fridge turned to the warmest temperature. Like it was just specifically a cheese fridge. And then like not even that long ago, I converted it I bought this little thing on Amazon. It's called the Inkbird. And it just is a thermostat controller, so it keeps the fridge consistently at 50 degrees Fahrenheit, which is, I wish I had invested in that sooner. I'm like, this is
okay.
so easy of a thing to do. But like, so you can start with really the bare minimum and then kind of work up from there as you see if you like it and as you kind of find the cheeses that you want to make.
So let's talk about the cheese cave because that's not something that I have delved into. And I have other friends who are excellent cheesemakers who do have cheese caves. And like a lot of them use like a wine refrigerator that has some
Mhm.
moisture control setting in there. That's a popular thing to do, but I have not done that and I haven't found it necessary. But like I said, I think before we pushed record, I'm a very basic cheesemaker. I have one pressed cheese that I do regularly, and everything else is a fresh cheese. So,
I don't know. I'm pretty impressed with your cheese making
are you?
skills.
Well, thank you.
Yes.
I think one cheese is absolutely fine for homesteaders. Like, I think we get too carried away with wanting to make all of the cheeses. But if you look back kind of historically, Ma Ingalls was probably only making one cheese for her family, and it was called cheese,
It was just
like,
Right.
cheese.
yeah, it was just cheese and it was good and it filled bellies and was satisfying. And so I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good reminder that we have to like kind of focus on. Like it doesn't have to be so complicated. It can be simple.
Yeah.
I can run with that.
Yeah, sometimes it's just about using up the milk, the extra milk that you have, or just about preserving, or just about feeding the masses. It's sometimes it doesn't matter what you call it. It's just
Yeah.
cheese that serves a purpose.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm
Yeah. And
starting
if
to
you were
get
thinking
hungry.
about, oh, sorry. Yeah, exactly. Need some cheese. If you were to think about like if you were gonna go out and buy cheese for your family, like if I didn't make my own cheese and I was going out to buy it, we would probably just buy like cheddar and mozzarella. That's what we would buy, and that would
Right.
serve all of the different needs for all of our different cooking needs. And so you don't really have to get so fancy if you don't want to, but then it's fun to get fancy too if you have the
Mhm.
milk.
Cheddar is fancy to me, I must say. I have so many people who ask, "Do you make cheddar?" I'm like, "No, I have made cheddar, and it took
Yeah,
forever." That
yeah,
cheddaring
it's
process,
long.
and maybe there's a better recipe. I haven't looked up the one in your book yet, or maybe there's a better process to do it because that cheddaring process it's just time consuming. And
It's very time consuming. Like it's the cheese that I only make if I know that I'm going to be home basically the whole day because it does take just so much hands-on time. We make a
Mhm.
lot of Colby though, just as a kind of a substitute for it. And I feel like it tastes like almost the same, although the cheddar is just a little bit drier.
Mhm.
And so like just finding those cheeses that are a little bit easier that are going to kind of suit those needs is helpful too.
Mhm.
I will look at your Colby recipe next then.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's one that we use a lot in this house too, but it's purchased because I'm not making it. But I will look into that for sure.
My husband's, well, yeah, string cheese, and that is his favorites for being from
Oh, you make
Wisconsin.
string
Yeah, the
cheese?
Colby.
Whoa.
Yeah, yeah.
Now I'm really impressed.
You could make string cheese too.
That's cool.
Yeah, it is cool. Okay, so is a cheese cave going to be absolutely necessary for aged cheeses?
No, it doesn't have to be absolutely necessary. Your cheeses, so you can age them. You just have to age them in a cool area. Like you don't want to just be storing them on your shelves. You need them to be in an area that's at least below 55 degrees Fahrenheit. Usually some cheeses are about 60, but I just tell people 55 degrees Fahrenheit and you're probably going to be good. So you could age them in your regular refrigerator, but they're going to age slower. It's just going to
Hmm.
take longer for that breakdown and ripening of the cheese to occur. So
Okay.
that's a good option when you're just getting started. One thing when we were talking about equipment that I should have mentioned is that a vacuum sealer is really helpful if you're
Mm.
looking at making aged cheeses for your family. So any cheese that is pressed and aged and doesn't require any sort of mold ripening can be vacuum sealed, and it's a really easy option to be able to fit it into your life. It's basically this does the same thing as waxing the cheese, where
Hmm.
it prevents any mold growth from growing on the rind of the cheese, and then it also provides a humidity controlled area, so no moisture is allowed to escape. And so that is just a really easy way to be able to fit it into your life because back when I used to wax cheeses, like it was this whole production. You go to making all these cheeses, and then now you have to get out all the waxing equipment and wax them, and you have to make sure the kids aren't in the kitchen because it's hot and fire risk and all the things. It was just this huge
Yeah.
production versus vacuum sealing and like just do it on whenever you have time kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds way easier.
Yeah.
So, question is because I hear you say aged cheese and then hard cheeses. Is that the same thing? Are those terms like interchangeable or
Not really. So aged
okay.
cheeses is any kind of cheese that is going to need to be ripened. So for example, you could have a soft cheese like a brie that is aged.
Okay.
Versus you could have some people make like a farmhouse cheddar or like a just like simple kind of pressed cheese and they'll eat it fresh. I don't really like the taste of those cheeses. They're kind of rubbery to me. But you could do that. Like you can eat any cheese before it's ripened. So they're different techniques basically. Is ripening it or aging is where you allow it to sit in this temperature controlled area, sometimes this humidity controlled area to continue to break down the cheese versus a hard cheese is just a cheese that has basically been pressed or the way that
Rest.
it's been made. Yeah.
So a question I get all the time is how long is this cheese good for? And I mean, we just eat cheese, so
Right. It doesn't last that long.
but I did have a lost ricotta in the back of the fridge. Like I hope
Mm.
most families can relate to having lost food in the back of the
Yeah.
fridge. And I thought I think one of my kids took it out and asked like, "Hey, is this any good?" And I was like, "I haven't made ricotta in a while. I don't know. I don't think I'd eat that." But I opened it and I normally tell people like your senses are there for a reason. Like if it smells
Right.
okay, it's probably okay. But I hate to tell other people that not knowing what is in their hand, you know. In that case, we did eat it. It was fine. But I've also had some that just got really bitter, like where it smelled fine and then we tasted it. And it's almost as if you're familiar with cheese at all, making cheese, um, if you use too much rennet in a recipe, how it just makes a bitter product. It was almost like that. So what do you tell people as far as what's the shelf life of their cheese?
Yeah, so it depends on whether it went through fermentation or not. So, for example, a ricotta can be made by utilizing fermentation, but it can also be made by just adding in an acid. So that was an ingredient that we didn't really talk about at the beginning, but some simple cheeses are made by just like taking milk and you add in vinegar, and instead of allowing fermentation to occur. And during that fermentation, the lactic bacteria, they break down the lactose and they create lactic acid, which creates an acidic environment. Instead of doing that, you just add an acid in and you cause this acidic environment. So then you get that fresh cheese. So if it's a cheese made like that, its shelf life is going to be a lot shorter than a cheese that went through that fermentation process. It also comes down to like the moisture content of the cheese. So usually
Mm,
cheeses that are higher moisture are going to spoil quicker than cheeses that have less moisture in them, and you're gonna get that bitter taste. Like for example, rennet, adding too much rennet into your cheeses, I think the bitter taste actually comes because we're encasing more moisture within that cheese, and then that's where that bitter flavor is kind of coming from.
okay.
So it just depends on the style of cheese that they've made and if it's gone through fermentation and how it's been stored. But I do agree with like using your senses. I'm pretty like strict about not eating cheeses that haven't gone through fermentation like any more than 2 weeks. Like if it's been in there for about 2 weeks and it was like an acid cheese, I probably wouldn't eat it.
Mhm.
Versus, if it had gone through fermentation, I'd be a little bit more lenient about it. But yeah, as far as like hard cheeses and stuff, I don't worry about hard cheeses as much as soft cheeses. So anytime you've got a soft cheese, there's just more chance that bacterias and unwanted things could kind of grow in it, versus the hard cheeses that just don't have as much moisture in them. They're
That
not
makes a
as
lot of
good
sense.
environments.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Um, I had a follow-up question to that, but I don't remember what it was. You may have answered it. Yeah, the fermentation process makes a lot of sense, and maybe that's what happened in ours. And also the liquid makes that additional fluid in there makes a lot of sense to you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Um, oh, I know what it was. Okay, so in your pressed cheeses, if you're on any kind of social media group about making your own cheese, you'll see endless photos of what happened to my cheese. What's going on here? And the only ones that ever get me are holes in a pressed cheese. So how can you tell the difference between holes that were just basically like a mechanical failure or a mechanical issue with the actual pressing of the cheese versus a contamination issue in your equipment or your milk, that you have bacterial holes growing in the cheese? How can you tell the difference in that?
Yeah, so mechanical holes, like you said, they're caused by mechanical error. Something went wrong in the cheese making that caused these little holes, and usually, like they're not a big deal at all. Sometimes they do cause problems because they are a sign that there was a lot of extra moisture within that cheese that got locked into that cheese, and then that can lead into just becoming really confusing because then gas production has happened in that cheese. So you've got mechanical holes and you've got gas holes, and you're like, what the heck is going on here?
Yeah.
But usually mechanical holes are going to be kind of irregular in size. They're going to be sort of sporadic. They're not going to be shiny inside. So that's how I tell that it's a mechanical hole. Versus a gas hole is a hole that's created by fermentation. So some sort of bacteria, whether it was a good bacteria or a bad bacteria, because there's all sorts of different bacteria out there that can create these holes. Whatever bacteria it was, it fermented that milk and caused this little gas hole. And so these holes are very uniform. They're shiny inside, so they're going to be kind of like a perfect little hole, unless they are up against a mechanical hole. Then they're then they're going to look like this shiny splat
Then it's
in
like
there. So
both.
that's where it really becomes a lot confusing. So I get so many pictures. I can't even tell you how many pictures I get from people about like, what is this hole in my cheese? And the truth is like I can tell if there's like a mechanical hole in there. Like I can look and be like, yeah, that was just a mechanical hole. These are the things that you can do to prevent that going forward. But if somebody sends me a picture that has gas holes in it, I can't do much other than be like, what was your culture? Because there's certain cultures that are known to cause gas production, and that's totally normal and safe. What was your milk handling practices? How fresh was your milk? Was it stored properly? Those are kind of things that I'll ask them. But really, the truth is like looking at a cheese that has holes in it, I can't say if it's safe or if it's not safe. So you really kind of have to use your gut. And a lot of that comes with just making a lot of cheese and getting that experience under your belt because I absolutely eat cheeses that have holes in them. But that's because I've thrown away a lot of cheeses that had holes in them. And I've kind of gotten to a point where I know what's normal and what's not normal.
Hmm.
And to a point where I feel comfortable with it. But I always tell people it's never worth losing sleep over. So if you're going to lose sleep over it, then your chickens will be happy to have it. Although people say it will kill your chickens, I've never killed a chicken with with holy cheese.
No, no,
But
yeah, I've
yeah, so
thrown
it's still
a lot of
yeah.
questionable cheese to my chickens. They've been fine.
Yeah, and like I look back and I threw so many cheeses that nowadays I would absolutely eat. I threw so many cheeses to my chickens in the beginning, but I think I had to go through that process
Mhm.
just of learning and knowing what was normal and what was not. Like if I have a cheese that expands in the first day, like the day after I make it, it's blowing up rather than shrinking down. That cheese I'm probably just going to throw to the
Hmm.
pigs or to the chickens. Versus if I have a cheese that's aged for months and I open it up and there's definitely some gas holes in there because I'm using Clabber culture and I know that that has the potential to cause some gas holes and because I really trust that my milk is good and I'm always using fresh milk for cheese making, then case by case I'd probably be more comfortable with it versus if I wasn't really sure about my milk source.
Cool.
Yeah.
So let's talk about how to fit dairy into life. Because I think a lot of people are afraid of keeping a dairy cow I mean, there's the commitment side of keeping it, but, and that scares a lot of people away, but also,
It's the what do you do with all the milk?
exactly. So, like
Yeah.
somebody who has a bunch of milk coming in, here's another question I see all the time. First of all, is like, I have 8 gallons of milk in my fridge. What do I make? And so I have a few things that I'll throw at them, like feta is one, pudding is one, anything that will freeze well, mozzarella and ricotta, stuff like that, that are fast, simple, basic, and will freeze. I usually tell people those things. So I want to know what your recommendation is for that problem. And then also, how do you fit it into every day? Because if you're getting 3, 4, 5 gallons of milk a day, and your family only drinks half a gallon of milk a day, you're going to have a backup very quickly.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I love your advice that you give people about things that will freeze and are fast because that's what I do all the time. Like if I have a lot of milk and I don't have a lot of time, I'm just going to make a huge batch of mozzarella. I'll shred it and freeze it put it in the freezer. And we have pizza night usually about once a week. Like we have a lot of pizza nights
Yeah.
just to use that. So that's a really great way to use it. I also like to tell people that it's very, like milk is very seasonal. If you have one dairy cow, she's not
Mm,
going to produce the same amount of milk throughout her entire lactation. So I kind of have cheese making season, and I like to think of it sort of like canning season. You know, when it's
Mm,
canning
right.
season and the garden is bumping, your canning pot is on the counter, like your stuff is always out in the kitchen. You're always kind of ready to go. You know, you're going to be processing vegetables that day or whatever you're processing. And so I look at cheese making the same way. When it's cheese making season, I'm getting a ton of milk. I'm going to be making a lot of cheese. I'm basically going to be making cheese every day. That saves me time in itself because I go down to the barn, I milk the cow, I strain the milk right into the pot, and I'm not having to like wash a bunch of milk jars because that takes a lot of time, skim a bunch of
mm,
cream. I'm not having to do that. I'm just know that I'm making cheese that day. And so that really helps me to fit it
mm,
into my life. I know where my cheese making equipment is. It's not this huge production. It's already out. And so I do that like for maybe a month or two until I have enough cheese for saving over and then or for however long I need to store it up for. And then I'm going to be maybe offloading it by using like the mozzarella recipe and making a lot of cheese for the freezer or offloading it to the pigs. Like it's nice if you do have a high production dairy animal to have another use for it on the farm because you are going to get
Right.
tired of processing it. And then also looking at like maybe you don't want to have that much milk. And so maybe you want to look at more of a heritage breed animal that's not going to be giving you like 8 gallons of milk a day because that's a
mhm,
lot of milk for a family versus maybe you want to look at an animal that's going to be giving you 3 gallons a day during peak lactation and then she's going to taper off and eventually you're going to be down to only getting 1 gallon of milk and that's manageable for your family to use that. And then you're back in cheese making season when she calves again.
Right.
true. And
Thank goodness for the seasons,
yeah,
right?
and if you have more than one cow, it's like always cheese making season.
Always. Yeah. That's when you get pigs.
But when you have that off season and you don't have fresh milk coming in and you don't have fresh cream for your coffee, you really, really wish you had more than one cow then. That's how it
Exactly. Like
starts.
right now we're in off season and yeah, like my one cow's not going to calve for another month and then the other one not for 2 months and it's so weird. But then you really lean into the cheeses that you put away
Mm,
during the heavy times, so that's helpful. Like I thought we were going to have to buy so much more milk, but we're just eating so much cheese during this time that we haven't had to buy as much milk as I thought, which is it's
mhm.
helpful.
Nice.
Do you freeze fresh milk ever to use?
I don't, but I've been like just this dry season, I've been hearing so much from people like you should have froze it, you should have froze it. And I think that maybe next time I will a little bit. The problem I run into is that we don't have any jugs to freeze it in because we buy our milk or sorry,
Oh.
because we are always, like not buying our milk. So if I had like a bunch of milk jugs and I could just put a bunch in the freezer, then I think that's something that I would do.
Mhm.
I'm saving my milk jugs this time around, so maybe next
Right.
time.
I don't I am asked that all the time also and I sell milk here locally and so I do have jugs to freeze it in and I have a lot of customers who say they freeze it so when we have extra to sell they'll buy it and freeze it. But I don't care for frozen milk thawed out. I
Yeah, I
don't
don't like the
ever feel
texture.
like yeah, the texture's never right. The cream never fully will shake to mix in. It's like something changes with the fat or something, the protein. I don't know. I just don't care for it. So if we're having a dry season, we're just having yogurt and cheese that we've already put that back that, we have saved. So we're just not doing
Yeah,
milk.
yeah. It's good. It's good to miss something. It's good to
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
remember why you love it.
Right.
Yeah.
Sometimes you don't really love it when you're like, this is too much.
It's like meat chicken season for me.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because that busy rotation is coming back and
Yeah.
yeah, you'll need to miss it to enjoy it again for sure.
for
Yeah.
sure.
So if you had, a few tips for beginners, what would be your best beginner tips?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think use the freshest possible milk that you can,
Okay.
would be my biggest tip. Because you're gonna see a lot, especially if you're making aged cheeses. If you're making fresh cheeses, like you said, like you use your older milk for your yogurt. It's a good way to offload that little bit of older, not so older, but a little bit of older milk. But using fresh milk for your aged cheeses is gonna be one way to make sure that your cheeses like definitely turn out because nothing's worse than going to all the work of making cheese and then going to eat it and it didn't turn out. So
Yeah.
using fresh milk is really going to help you with that. Starting kind of slow and working your way up. You don't have to do everything on day one. Just starting with those simpler, fresher dairy products and then slowly building on, building on. And that's one thing about the book. It's kind of built that way. It's built to help you start with the yogurt and the butter. And then by the end, like if you want to follow the book all the way through, then you're making like that Parmesan style cheese by the end. So
Nice.
just kind of, yeah, not thinking that you have to do it all on day one, and then not thinking that you have to do it all even once you know how to do it. There's nothing wrong with just making one or two good cheeses that your family really loves and making those cheeses over and over again because you know how to fit them into your life. It's not overwhelming to have to like read the recipe every time. You just know it's in your head, and that helps fit it into your life a lot easier.
Yeah, good advice. I
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
Start with one thing, master it, and then maybe move on. Maybe not.
I mean, kind of like everything else we tell people in homestead life,
That's right.
don't try to do it all in a day. That's
Take on one thing at a time.
excellent advice.
Exactly.
All right, Robyn, tell us where our listeners can find you and your book. I'll show it up here again for our listeners. Cheese from Scratch. It's
Thank you.
Robyn Jackson. How can listeners find you?
So Instagram, I'm pretty active on. I'm on there almost every day, which seems crazy. So cheese from scratch with little underscores after all the cheese underscore from underscore scratch underscore. And then I have a YouTube channel. You can find that just by Googling my website. There's some like blog recipes and stuff on there as well. Yeah, and then my book through my publisher Homestead Living or on Amazon. It's on if you're international. So you can get it on Canadian Amazon or American Amazon. And if you're international, you can actually order it through American Amazon. And most people, like people in Norway and Australia, are able to get it that way. So that's one way to do it.
Nice.
Very cool. It is well worth it. It's a beautiful book. It has
It is.
beautiful pictures. I
Mhm.
love the depth of how it starts simple and you can graduate through the harder stuff. But I love the detail that you've put in here. To me, I mean, that's huge. It's something that I've either found this is like the Goldilocks cheese making book. I have found too basic or too intense
Right.
and like just too much science for me. Like I like science and I see the point behind it in cheese making, but there's a place for it. And I feel like some of the books are just too much. This is a really great detail book that I feel like anybody can pick up and have some fresh milk and get started. So
Awesome. Thank you. That's so nice.
you did
That's
a
nice.
wonderful job.
Nice.
Thank you. It was definitely a labor of love.
I'm
I bet
sure.
it is.
I'm sure. It shows. You did a really great job.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on here today to educate all of us about making dairy and cheese. And it was very eye-opening, and I can definitely say that I learned a lot. So hopefully our listeners gleaned from it as well.
Yeah, I think so.
I think so.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for having me. It was very fun.
Thank you, Robyn.
It was fun. Thanks, Robyn.